Discover how a struggling waitress transformed a billion-dollar crisis with one incredible act. The rain slapped against the diner windows, creating a constant, drumming rhythm that matched the pulse of Emily's escalating anxiety. Today was like any other. She filled cups with black coffee, tapped plates of meatloaf and mashed potatoes to the regulars, all while keeping a watchful eye on her daughter, Lily. At just 8 years old, Lily was the light in Emily's life, but with every shift, the weight of bills and uncertainties lay heavier on her shoulders, pressing deeper into the doubt that gnawed at her insides. The diner, Maple Grove, was more than a paycheck. It was a thread woven through her life, filled with comforting voices and laughter that echoed like a warm embrace amidst her chaotic existence. But all that changed when the front doors swung open, revealing a corporate executive clad in a tailored suit, a striking contrast to the diner's warm, worn atmosphere. He casually cleared his throat, commanding silence with an unsettling ease. Due to market consolidation, he announced, grinning with the arrogance of someone untouched by the concerns of everyday life, we're closing this establishment to make way for a state-of-the-art facility. Emily's heart dropped. The laughter and connection in the diner felt like a distant memory as an icy reality loomed in. This wasn't just a diner, it was a sanctuary for many, and now, it was being swept away like crumbs on the counter. Panic coiled tightly within her chest, as she imagined her daughter growing up without the soulful backdrop that shaped her childhood. How could she explain to Lily that their world was crumbling, that the laughter and warmth they took for granted might soon vanish? The meeting ended, but Emily remained paralyzed at the counter, a cold cup of coffee never reaching her lips. That evening, she returned home, Lily sprawled out on the living room floor, crayons dancing over the page, illustrating the diner with vibrant colors. "Look, Mommy. It's us at the diner," Lily said, beaming with innocence. Each crayon stroke pulled at Emily's heart faint memories of birthday celebrations, comforting hugs from regulars, the way Mrs. Simmons always insisted on paying for Lily's ice cream. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. That night, insomnia clung to her like a stubborn fog. Each thought spiraled into a tempest of urgency. How could she protect this piece of life for her daughter? Could a waitress truly fight a billion-dollar corporation? The fire ignited inside her, forcing her to confront the chilling question, can I find the courage to stand up for what matters? The next day, the town gathered, voices echoing in the diner, and fear trickled through Emily's veins like ice. It dawned on her that the community was connected to the diner like branches on a tree. They shared stories, heartbreaks, and dreams. As they spoke of their love for Maple Grove, Emily felt a flicker of determination. Would their shared memories be strong enough to push back against the cold hand of progress? It was her turn to speak, and as she approached the makeshift stage, her heart raced and doubts flickered like a dying ember within her. She clenched the microphone, forcing her trembling hands to remain steady. As she began to share tales of the diner, of Mr. Thompson's unlikely kindness, of kids who played pretend at a corner booth, and the beautiful moments trapped in the comfort of greasy food, hope spiraled through the room, interwoven with fear. What if she was too late? What if her words fell on deaf ears, lost against the gales of progress? But she couldn't back down now. Taking a deep breath, she watched the corporate man. The flicker in his eyes ignited her spirit. Perhaps there was still a chance. Emily stood at the center of attention, the air thick with anticipation as the weight of her words hung heavily in the room. She could see the faces of the regulars, their expressions an intricate tapestry of concern and sadness. Each one had a personal connection to the diner, each memory a thread binding their lives to its worn, welcoming walls. Yet, despite the sinking anxiety gripping her, a new sense of urgency flooded her veins. As she spoke of the connections forged over simple meals and heartfelt moments, Mr. Thompson's gentle laughter, the birthday parties that echoed with song, and the late-night conversations that flowed over coffee, Emily felt something shift. It was as if her words were a lifeline cast into choppy waters, reaching out to those who felt equally marooned, but even as she summoned their memories, a shadow of doubt whispered in the back of her mind. What difference could a few stories make against the relentless machinery of corporate expansion? The corporate man's smug smile burned in her memory, a reminder of the fierce opponent she was up against. She needed something more than nostalgic reflections. "I know I'm just a waitress," she finally admitted, her voice steadying as she leaned into honesty. "But this diner is more than a job. It's a home for many of us, a place where we've escaped our struggles, even if just for a moment." The murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, emboldening her, igniting a fire she didn't know she had within. Then, a thought struck her, sharp and clear. Perhaps it was about more than just memories, it was about action. There had to be a tangible response, a plan to counteract the impending change. The idea bubbled beneath the surface, transforming her fear into a brewing storm of resolve. After the gathering, Emily spent the night pacing her small living room, brainstorming ideas that danced between practical and audacious. One thought echoed louder than the others: maybe they could rally support, cultivate a shared campaign against the closure, something that could draw in attention and leverage the diner's legacy. There was power in their shared stories, but could it be harnessed? The rain continued to patter against the windows, a steady reminder of the storm brewing both outside and inside herself. Equipped with courage and a few scraps of paper, she mapped out her thoughts, outlining a plan for a community-driven petition. Each signature could symbolize a commitment to fight for the heartbeat of Maple Grove. Sitting down with her laptop, she began crafting the petition, pouring her heart into words that expressed not just the need to save a diner but rather the significance of preserving a refuge where people had found connection and solace. "There's strength in unity," she murmured to herself as she envisioned the faces of her friends and regulars, each signing their names. The idea grew, a wild vine overtaking the previous fear, and she began to draft a social media post to spread the word, leveraging her limited digital skills to drum up support. Passing through each stage of her plan, she heard Lily's laughter from the other room, reminding her that everything she fought for was woven into the very fabric of their lives. The thought became her anchor, a resolve that drowned out the voice of doubt. The morning light illuminated her living room as she clicked post. Today would be the day of action. Today, she would take her stand. The storm was only beginning, and with it came the necessity to face the corporate man directly, eyes unlocked to the resolve of one who had nothing left to lose. What Emily didn't know, however, was that her actions would soon attract unexpected attention she would need to navigate expertly in the upcoming showdown. The battle lines had been drawn, but against whom would they stand? Emily awoke to the sound of the world bustling outside, a different cadence than the stormy night that had surrounded her. As she sipped her coffee, the warmth of the cup seeped into her hands, anchoring her to the moment and reminding her of the resolve she had kindled just hours before. The simple act of drafting a post had shifted something monumental within her. Yesterday, she had been a waitress, merely serving food. Today, she felt more like a champion of truth, ready to face the tide of change head-on. She logged into her social media to check the response to her petition. Her throat tightened when she saw the notifications. A flood of likes, shares, and comments filled the screen. Each notification was like a heartbeat, growing stronger as more people rallied to support a cause that had become personal for many. For the first time, Emily's fear was overshadowed by an exhilarating sense of agency. This was where her narrative began to expand, intertwining her own story with that of her community. Reflecting on her skills, she recalled moments from her past, even before she stepped into the diner. She had always been the one in her friend group to organize gatherings, pulling together disparate personalities into a cohesive celebration of life. Yet, never had she thought that this ability could translate into a larger purpose. She had grown accustomed to playing the role of the listener rather than the orchestrator. And now, the stakes were higher than they had ever been. As midday approached, Emily decided to spearhead an informal meeting at the diner. Scanning the room filled with tables and empty chairs, she visualized the familiar faces of her regular patrons, each a vital thread in the fabric of their shared space. The plan was simple: to strategize, to brainstorm how they could mobilize effectively against the corporate force looming above them. Yet, what if the meeting turned out to be a celebration of their collective strength rather than just desperation? She arrived early, her heart racing in anticipation. One by one, her regulars trickled in. There was Mrs. Caldwell, with her wise smile, ready to recount stories of her late husband's proposal over pancakes. Then came Jack, the mechanic, who insisted he could fix anything in the diner that was broken, even if it was just his heart in the process. As they shared reminiscences, laughter filled the air, and the diner became a sanctuary once more, not just against the threat of closure but against the isolation they each had felt in the hustle of daily life. When the time came to address the group, Emily sensed the shift in atmosphere, a charge of momentum building with each shared reflection. "This diner means something to all of us," she began, her voice trembling yet resolute. "But we need to go beyond just sharing our stories. We need a plan that has teeth, something that can challenge the corporate powers at play." The room remained silent, everyone hanging onto her words. A spark ignited as people began tossing out ideas, some wild and others practical. They debated social media outreach tactics, potential protests, and even how to reach out to local news outlets. Emily's confidence surged as she realized they were no longer mere patrons, they were co-conspirators in a movement, discovering their potential together. Yet with the brainstorming came a heavy weight. The corporate man they faced wasn't merely a nameless foe, he was a symbol of a wider fight. Emily felt the pressure rise within her. Could she really navigate this world of combativeness? What if she faltered at the moment when they most needed her leadership? The questions gnawed gently at her, but an unseen force kept her anchored. When the meeting concluded, Emily left the diner feeling invigorated yet daunted. She had become an unexpected leader, igniting something in others that had lain dormant for too long. With this new role came a profound responsibility. The idea of needing to not only speak up but to confront the corporate man directly hovered almost tantalizingly in her mind. Little did she know. She was being watched. A figure loomed in the distance, one who wouldn't take kindly to an unyielding waitress who dared to challenge his plans. The time was drawing near for Emily to prepare for her biggest test, the moment she would truly discover what she was made of. Emily woke the next morning with a fresh wave of determination coursing through her veins. It was time to step up. Clenching her fists, she mentally prepared to take ownership of her newfound role as a leader. Her mind was a whirlwind of strategies and possibilities, restlessly navigating the path laid out ahead. She had spent her life accommodating others' needs, but now the urgency of their shared mission consumed her. With each sip of coffee, she mentally reviewed the plans from yesterday's meeting, detailing who would handle what in their Grassroots campaign and considering logistics for upcoming outreach. What had started as a whisper among friends now demanded a full-throated shout. Emily glanced at her reflection in the kitchen window. Her eyes spoke of a woman unafraid of breaking the mold. Confidence had crept in subtly, each fleeting doubt being washed away by the buoyancy of her resolve. As she readied herself for the day, Emily's thoughts converged on the figure she had seen, lurking in the background at the diner. Although she hadn't been able to identify him, the unshakable feeling of being watched sent a shiver through her. Was he connected to that corporate threat she had envisioned? The mystery churned within her, pushing her forward with a sense of urgency. To confront what lay ahead, she knew she needed more than just courage, she required knowledge. That morning, she set off to gather information. The local library had become her sanctuary, a treasure trove of resources, and a refuge from the distractions of the diner. Sitting at a wooden table, she plunged into news clippings, online reports, and social media feeds. Each piece of information pieced together a larger picture of their adversary, the corporation poised to make them disappear. Despite the scale of the challenge, the gathering storm within her swelled, igniting a drive to truly understand her opponent. Emily absorbed stories of other grassroots movements that had emerged victorious against bigger entities, documenting strategies that had worked. With every revelation, her mind raced faster: coalition building, legal advisements, leveraging the community's voice. These were no longer abstract ideas, they were tools she would wield with ferocity. A thread of excitement nestled in her core. This knowledge was power, and it was hers, but the deeper she dug, the more unsettling truths emerged. She discovered unsavory practices the corporation had employed in previous acquisitions, sweatshops disguised as partnerships. Each revelation brought with it a piercing moral dilemma. The question loomed, could she align herself with such corporate malfeasance in her pursuit of justice? The complexity of the situation weighed heavily. Her own values were intertwined with her emerging role. Suddenly, a figure crossed her peripheral vision, jolting Emily out of her thoughts. It was an old acquaintance from the diner, a local journalist known for his investigative pieces. Seeing an unexpected ally in the making, she decided to reach out. There was no time to waste. "Hey, you!" she called out, her voice steady despite the anxious flutter in her stomach. As he turned towards her, the warm familiarity of their previous exchanges settled her nerves. She needed him to understand her vision, to recognize the weight of the fight they were about to embark on. After a brief exchange, as they settled into a conversation over coffee, Emily's mind raced even faster. Could she convince him to publish a piece highlighting their plight and the corporation's greed? The stakes were rising. She felt the urgency pressing against her chest. This was becoming real, and she needed to act swiftly. The moment felt electric. The journalist's eyes glimmered with intrigue as she laid out her narrative. What had once begun as a small petition now shifted into an invitation for exposure. The sense of purpose cemented itself firmly in her heart. She was no longer an unassuming waitress, this was her fight. As they discussed angles, she remembered the figure watching from the shadows. The pressure mounted. Would he retaliate? What were his intentions? A chill ran down her spine. The clash between her resolve and the tangible threat was palpable. It deepened her commitment to confront the corporate man head-on. The time for deliberation was dwindling. The next step loomed clearly before her, taking on the man who represented everything she stood against. She could no longer linger in the safety of her ambitions. To win this battle, she would have to prepare for confrontation. Emily felt the weight of the moment pressing upon her. The time had come to face off against the real adversary threatening their home. The challenge, however, was more daunting than she realized. Would she be prepared for the darkness hiding behind the corporate threat or succumb to fear? Each heartbeat echoed the urgency of what lay ahead. Emily couldn't shake off the unease that coiled itself around her as she left the library. The air felt heavier, every echo of her footsteps vibrating with a heightened sense of reality. The urgency in her mission pressed against her chest like an iron weight, a constant reminder of what was at stake. She had sought information to empower her, but with knowledge came the chill of reality. She couldn't afford to underestimate the corporation's ruthlessness. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, jolting her from her thoughts. It was the journalist, his name flashing on the screen. She fought the instinct to hesitate. Instead, she answered with a voice steadied by her commitment. They arranged to meet later that evening to discuss the article in greater detail. Coordinating their strategy would be crucial. Introducing the community to their plight couldn't happen without a compelling narrative to ensnare public interest. The hours dragged on until she finally met him at a small cafe, one where their familiar exchanges could settle into deeper realms. They quickly transformed the ordinary setting into a war room filled with stakes and strategies. With every word they exchanged about the corporation's unethical practices, Emily felt her resolve crystallize. The tale they crafted was not merely a report, it was a chance for revolution. As she spoke of personal stories, the single mothers struggling to make ends meet, the elders whose lives were rooted in the land, Emily was acutely aware that this fight was larger than herself. These weren't mere statistics, they were lives intertwined with her own. Her heart raced as she realized how easily they could be discarded by a faceless entity just for the greed of profit, but the journalist sensed her determination. "This can't be just about the fight," he said, leaning toward her. "It has to resonate. It's about the people, the community. We must show our readers what they stand to lose." His words sank deep within her as they sketched out the narrative that would pierce through apathy, yet, even as the fire of intention ignited within her, a shadow unfurled in the back of her mind. The lurking figure at the diner still haunted her. Who was he, and how did he fit into this tangled web? The knowledge she had gathered became suffused with anxiety. As much as she longed to hold fast to her vision, the fear of repercussions loomed. After their meeting, Emily knew she had reached a critical juncture in her personal growth. For years, she abjured conflict, letting choices be made for her while she served others. This new chapter demanded she not only confront the corporation but also the darker corners of her own psyche. Could she stand firm in her beliefs even when cornered? Was her newfound leadership strong enough to withstand the pressure? Returning to her apartment later that night, she sat in the dim light, enlisting her thoughts on paper. Each word felt like armor being forged anew. She was piecing together her narrative with fierce urgency. But every gain was tempered by the presence of the figure that haunted her thoughts. Who would he report to? What machinations lay behind his ominous observations? Suddenly, there was a knock at the door, slicing through her focus. Heart racing, she approached cautiously. Peering through the peephole, she felt the breath hitch in her throat. The same shadowy presence awaited her on the other side. A shiver crept down her spine as she twisted the doorknob slightly, the promise of confrontation crackling in the air. The figure stood there seemingly inconspicuous, yet she couldn't shake off the feeling that he knew more than she did. Emily realized she'd have to navigate a landscape that was far more treacherous than she'd anticipated. The battle ahead might be fought on multiple fronts, externally against the corporation and internally against her fears. As she opened the door, the question loomed: would she emerge victorious, or would this encounter serve to shatter her newfound identity as a leader? The time for preparation was over. She would need to summon every ounce of her determination as the confrontation unfolded. What awaited her could mean everything she had fought for, or perhaps the end of her journey before it had truly begun. The door creaked open, and Emily's breath caught as she faced the figure. It was the same man from the diner, his features obscured by the dim light. It felt as though he were a ghost materializing from her anxieties, leaving her with the palpable weight of her own vulnerabilities. "Can I help you?" she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. Each word out of her mouth was a mental act of defiance against the uncertainty that loomed. He stepped into her space, the casual demeanor he wore in public now replaced by an intensity that made her heart pound. "You're in over your head," he said simply, almost without inflection, as if reciting a line he had rehearsed countless times. "What do you mean?" she challenged, instinctively stepping back into herself. The truth was, he was right. She was treading dangerously close to the edge. His gaze held hers firmly. "You think you're ready to take them on, but they won't hesitate to destroy anyone who stands in their way. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Emily steadied herself, drawing from the reservoir of bravery she had unearthed over the past weeks. "I'm ready to fight," she said, barely believing the words herself. The fight was not merely about her. She felt it in her bones that it was for those who lacked her privilege. "What are you gonna do? Write a letter? Start a petition? This isn't about sentiment. They will sweep you aside like you're nothing," he pressed, his voice edged with fear for her. "It's more than that," Emily shot back, cross-firing her urgency as he hesitated. "I've learned things, connected dots that others haven't. I'm not alone in this." Her words resonated with the conviction she had been nurturing for days. He studied her for a moment, his expression betraying a flicker of admiration, or was it caution? "If you're serious, then you need real information, real insider knowledge. Not just hollow words." A jolt of realization surged through her. "Are you offering to help me? Do you have that information?" "Let's just say I know a few things about them," he replied, his tone shifting from skeptical to cryptic. "But the path you're on isn't just a moral quest, it's a war. And in war, there are sacrifices." The word sacrifice hung in the air, heavy and palpable. Emily felt a chill run through her. What would she have to give up? Her thoughts whirled, the cost of her ambition began to materialize as a swirling fog of potential loss. But she couldn't turn back now. She had witnessed the suffering. Could she really walk away? "What do you need from me?" she asked, resolving to push through the creeping doubts. "First, understand the risks. They've eyes everywhere. If you want my help, you'll need to prove your worth and your intentions. You need to show them you're not just an inconvenience, that you are a threat." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. "Your community will require proof, they will test your resolve." She nodded, feeling a surge of adrenaline course through her veins. She wasn't just fighting a corporate giant anymore. She was stepping into the realm of strategy, manipulation, and potential betrayal. What's next? "First, I'll need a way to observe their operations without drawing attention," he said, pulling a small notepad from his jacket. "We'll begin with their next shipment. You'll need to get close, not just witness but document everything." As he outlined a plan, Emily felt her resolve strengthen. Each detail added to the narrative she was crafting, not merely for her but for the people she cared about. The stakes were nigh impossible. She was diving into a web of deception far deeper than she had anticipated. Finally, as the conversation reached its zenith, he leaned closer, his eyes searching hers. "But remember, once you pull this thread, there's no going back. You'll either expose them, or they will bury you." As he slipped a small piece of paper into her palm, the weight was clear. This encounter had shifted everything, propelling her further into a landscape filled with unknown dangers. The first seed of doubt was planted. Could she truly manage? The dual fragility of her ambition and the fallout that could ensue, with determination ignited afresh, she nodded resolutely. "I'm ready for whatever comes next." As he turned to leave, the ominous reminder hung in the air. The deeper she delved, the more she risked unraveling not just the corporation's secrets, but perhaps her very self in the process. The door closed behind him, leaving Emily standing alone, the rush of adrenaline simmering beneath the surface. She felt like sharp steel drawn from a forge, but with a sprig of anxiety that lingered. Would she emerge unscathed or shattered after confronting the real power behind her adversary? Emily stared at the small piece of paper in her palm, its edges soft and warm, contrasting sharply with the coldness of uncertainty swirling in her mind. The word scribbled on it felt like a promise and a burden all at once, her compass guiding her through the treacherous waters ahead. She opened it slowly, each fold representing a decision yet to be made. The instructions were cryptic, hinting at the need for stealth, but the details revealed a specific location, a warehouse near the docks, where the corporation she was up against conducted mysterious shipments. A surge of dread mixed with exhilaration coursed through her. This was no longer just about her personal ambition. It was about confronting an entity that had exploited too many, including herself. Sitting down at her kitchen table, Emily willed herself to focus, knowing that she needed a strategy. This was not a simple act of defiance, it was a deep dive into a dangerous game. She closed her eyes for a moment, visualizing the warehouse, the docks, and the darkness that surrounded them. Fear lingered just beneath the surface, a constant reminder of her vulnerability. But with it came determination. She couldn't falter. Failure meant more than just personal embarrassment, it could mean lives affected by the corporation's ruthless practices. As her resolve crystallized, she took a blank notepad and began jotting down her thoughts. She would need a disguise, a persona to move through the shadows undetected. A small-time delivery driver? She could blend into the background. It would allow her the freedom to document everything while remaining inconspicuous. Emily's mind raced as she sketched out a plan, weaving together the threads of her strategy. What if they recognized her? What if someone from the diner spotted her? The doubts clouded her mind, but she pushed them away. To allow fear to dictate her actions would be surrender, and she had no room for that. As she plotted, Emily felt an uneasy thrill, the thrill of being on the precipice of change. She would gather intel, observe the operations closely, and compile evidence that could expose the corporate deception masquerading as progress. This task felt monumental, like aligning the stars. Only she held the power to make it happen. But what if they discovered her? The thought lingered ominously. The mere idea sent a shiver down her spine. To confront this organization would mean accepting not just the external risks but the internal turmoil, the uncertainty of her capabilities and sanity. What if she wasn't enough? Strengthening her resolve, Emily scratched out a list of contacts, people who might help, allies she could trust. There was Eve, a local journalist known for her integrity, and then Leo, a friend from college who had connections in tech. She needed to gather support and find others willing to navigate this tumultuous path with her. The communal strength she had forsaken before now echoed in her mind. The next morning, Emily donned her disguise, a plain cap and oversized jacket, a stark contrast from her usual waitress attire. As she stepped outside into the morning light, a twinge of fear twisted in her stomach, but it was overshadowed by an undeniable urgency. She was no longer merely a waitress acting on impulse, she had transformed into an agent of change. Driving to the warehouse, she replayed her strategy in her mind, reinforcing her intent. Observation. Documentation. Evidence. These weren't just tasks, they were her lifeline. Pulling into the gravel lot, her heart raced as she took a deep breath, reminding herself that this act wasn't solely for her relief, it was for those who had suffered in silence. And then she spotted a metal shipping container marked with the corporation's logo half opened, the shadows inside beckoning her forward. Would she seize this moment to delve deeper into the heart of a lie, or would the risks consume her half-formed ambition? With a final deep breath, she turned off the ignition and stepped out of the car, determination coursing through her. Today was the day she would confront the unknown, and she was ready for whatever it had in store. As Emily moved towards the shadows of the warehouse, each step intensified the battle within, a question that loomed larger than her fears. Could she emerge transformed by this journey, or would it unravel her entirely? Emily adjusted her cap, its brim casting a shadow over her eyes as she approached the warehouse. The closer she got, the more the initial thrill of adventure faded, replaced by a biting apprehension that gnawed at her confidence. Each echoing footstep served as a reminder that she was entering hostile territory, a place filled with unanswered questions and impending danger. Reaching the entrance, she paused to take in the immense structure. The warehouse loomed over her, its grim facade a stark reminder of the unseen operations within. Gathering her resolve, she pushed past the heavy door, moving quietly into the dimly lit interior. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of metal and something she couldn't quite identify, a sharp reminder of the realities of her mission. The moment she crossed the threshold, her heart raced. She quickly scanned her surroundings, looking for a vantage point, a place where she could gather information without drawing any attention. Every creaking floorboard beneath her feet felt like a siren call, and with each hesitant step, Emily wrestled with her mounting anxiety. The thought of being caught haunted her, a specter lurking just beyond her awareness. Drawing strength from her purpose, she crept toward a stack of crates positioned at the side of the cavernous space. From here, she had a clear view of the area where dock workers moved purposefully, wheeling carts laden with boxes and parcels marked with the corporation's logo. She took out her phone, fingers trembling slightly, and began documenting the scene, capturing images that could serve as evidence. Each snapshot felt like a small victory, a fortification against her self-doubt, but then doubt crept back in. Was this truly enough? The evidence she gathered felt flimsy against the massive scale of the deception she faced. Would a few grainy pictures and hastily jotted notes make any impact? Emily fought against the creeping despair, knowing that this mission required not just her courage, but ingenuity and strategy. As she focused intently on the unfolding operations, she couldn't shake a feeling of deep unease. Who was she to challenge this behemoth? Just a waitress with a vendetta? The mere idea that her actions could turn the tide against a corporation that had crushed so many filled her with both fear and exhilaration. Each passing moment became a battle, a back and forth between her instincts urging caution and her resolve to push forward. Then, her heart dropped. A small group of men in suits entered the warehouse, their presence commanding and assertive. They immediately began discussing the shipments, their voices low but filled with a tense urgency. Emily strained to catch snippets of their conversation, her mind racing to decode their intent. What were they plotting? Her intuition screamed at her to get out, yet, she felt anchored in place, compelled to listen, to uncover. The stakes had shifted abruptly, and the failures of her past no longer mattered. This was her moment to seize control, to be the catalyst for change she craved. Just as she reached for her phone to record their meeting, her foot slipped slightly on the old wooden floor, sending a sharp warning jolt through her body. The noise drew the men's attention, and suddenly, she was no longer a specter in the shadows, she was exposed. Panic threatened to take over, but what would she do now? Would she flee, abandoning her mission, or push forward, knowing instinctively that she was meant to be here in this moment? Holding her breath, Emily pressed herself back against the crates, the sound of her racing heart drowning out everything around her. The air was thick with tension, and she sensed that the direction of her journey was about to change irrevocably. In that perilous instant, a realization struck her: this was not a mere coincidence or impulsive decision. It was the culmination of her fight for justice. Could she indeed forge a new path from the crumbling remnants of her past? As the tension in the room escalated, she felt the weight of choice settle on her shoulders. Was she ready to confront the truth that lay ahead, no matter how perilous it might be? Time would tell, yet she understood that deep inside, she was more capable than she'd ever given herself credit for. The door creaked in the distance, rattling her focus, and she braced for whatever came next. Would she confront the looming threat head-on, or retreat into the obscurity she had spent too long in? Emily's muscles tightened as she heard the men begin to move in her direction, their conversation growing louder, more urgent. Instinctively, her body screamed for flight, but her mind pushed her to stay put, to gather what intelligence she could. This was not a moment to falter. Each second felt like a critical tick of a countdown clock, demanding action. Peering through the slits between the crates, she caught glimpses of their sleek suits and sharp features. There was a tension among them that she hadn't noted before. They were no longer just men discussing shipments, they seemed to be discussing something far more dangerous. Perhaps her presence here was not just about findings, pictures or notes, but uncovering a deeper, darker plot. Focus, she thought, steadying her breath. She needed to think like a strategist. What's the best course of action? As the men huddled, she could feel the ground shifting beneath her. Her previous hesitation faded, replaced by a surge of determination. For the first time, she began considering her next steps, not as a frightened waitress, but as someone capable of exposure and confrontation. If she could decipher their scheme, she could turn this entire operation on its head. Relying on adrenaline, Emily silently shifted into the shadows, inching closer to their gathered group. Eavesdropping became a dual act of courage and desperation, her heart pounding in her ears while her mind raced to keep up with the dialogue unfolding. Snippets of phrases reached her ears: disposal, no witnesses, and the most chilling of all, secrecy at all costs. Each word hit her like a freight train. They weren't merely discussing shipments, they had plans that extended into the realm of the unspeakable. The weight of the realization pressed down on her, an urgent call to action crystallizing amid the chaos. What was her role in this? Emily stared at them, her heart pounding harder than ever. She had always seen herself as an insignificant player in the grand scheme, just someone whose experiences were limited to serving drinks and taking orders. But now she was staring down the barrel of a decision that could alter her life forever. Steeling herself, she remembered her training from the previous months, the lessons she'd absorbed from online courses and books about investigative tactics. The strategies she had thought trivial were swirling in her mind. She whispered to herself, "You belong here. You are more than a waitress." At that moment, a new, fiery resolve ignited within her. The unfamiliar energy coursing through her veins was empowering. The desire to uncover the truth transformed into a personal mission. She would no longer shy away from her fears, she would confront them, arm herself with knowledge, and execute her plan. As the men continued to discuss their sinister plans, resilience replaced fear within her. She needed to capture incontrovertible evidence that couldn't simply be dismissed. With shaking hands, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, crafting a strategy to stay aloft. Noticing a nearby console, she quickly moved toward it, knowing it could serve as a cover to document their growing conspiracy. Fingers flying, she switched on the recording app, positioning it discreetly to capture not only their words but also the details around her, the shipping labels, the symbols on the crates, and faces she might later have to identify. Just as she secured the perfect angle, her phone vibrated sharply, the notification rattling her composure. It was a message, an actual text from her friend asking where she was, making her heart sink momentarily. But she couldn't respond now, her mission was too critical. Suddenly, one of the suited men turned slightly, scanning the area, and Emily froze. Would they see her? As silence enveloped the space, she had a split-second choice to make. Did she risk blowing her cover and retreat now, or did she stay, embrace the chaos unfolding and let her newfound courage guide her? The decision burned inside her as the men resumed their conversation, unaware of the storm brewing in their midst. In a world where their dangerous agendas thrived in the dark, Emily felt the truth tingle at her fingertips, waiting to be seized. That was it, she couldn't turn back. But as the tension stretched tight against her resolve, she wondered, could she really unravel the depth of their conspiracy without losing everything? The moment hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of potential disaster. As Emily navigated the shadowy corners of the warehouse, determination pulsed through her veins, fueling an identity she had scarcely recognized as her own. The minutes spent listening to the men in suits became her training ground. She would no longer be just a waitress. She was walking a line that separated complacency from defiance, wielding her newfound strength like armor against doubt. Her heart thundered as she positioned herself to gather footage, capturing the essence of their conversation. The chilling words echoed in her mind: disposal, no witnesses. These men weren't merely discussing logistics, they were conspiring to erase lives, including those who thrived within the Maple Grove diner she had fought to save. Every second felt loaded with monumental repercussions, awakening a fire in her that was raw and fierce. Emerging from the shadows, Emily's senses heightened, her instincts kicked in, steering her toward the criminals she had once thought beyond reach. Taking a firm grip on her phone, she swallowed her fear, the adrenaline illuminating her path. She glanced around, assessing the scene. The room was a labyrinth filled with equipment and boxes, a fortress designed to hide their deeds. They believed themselves untouchable, wrapped in layers of privilege and deception. She was here to unearth the truth, a reality that thrived outside their walls. Her heart raced as the men began discussing clandestine shipments that would mask the corporation's disposal of assets they deemed obsolete, people included. Each whispered plot struck her with an urgency she had scarcely anticipated. Emily was now part of this narrative, an unwilling player pushing back against the corporate machine intent on swallowing lives whole. It was as if a chapter clicked into place. Every hour spent gathering signatures, sharing stories, and rallying the community surged to this moment of clarity. She was an architect of change, and her tools were truth and conviction. Suddenly, one of the men made a remark that sent a jolt through her. "If we can just move them out without anyone knowing, we'll squash this little movement before it gains traction," he said dismissively. Anger flared within Emily at the mention of her friends, the regulars, her neighbors reduced to mere inconveniences. Fueled by a new urgency, she inched closer, careful to remain out of sight. Her phone continued to record not just the sinister discussions but the very essence of a cover-up that could catalyze their community's fight for justice. This evidence must serve as the damning weapon against the looming threat. She would not allow them to erase their laughter and connections. Then, she caught their eye. One man stood abruptly, a predator homing in on a target. "I think I saw someone," he declared, scanning the warehouse with hawk-like vigilance. Emily's pulse quickened, the stakes soaring as adrenaline surged. "Stay calm," she whispered to herself, a mantra amidst the panic. This was what she had prepared for. She had to act decisively but discreetly. The notion of retreat flickered in her mind, but the resolve to confront her fears ignited her spirit. If she turned back now, all she had fought for would dissolve. With a quick calculation, Emily bolted to a nearby stack of crates, pressing her back against the cold metal, heart pounding against her ribs. The tension rippled in the air. She was acutely aware of the thin veil separating action from consequence. If she could just gather enough proof, peering around the corner, she connected the dots of their machinations, spotting shipping labels, lucrative connections tied to powerful backers hidden beneath deceptive facades. If she could gather these and plant them into the public eye, she could incite a backlash, a community rising against might with solidarity, just as she secured another record of their exchanges, a deep-seated conversation about secretive board meetings. The men turned again, suspicion hanging palpably in the air. Emily crouched low, her breath caught in her throat, ready to flee should the need arise. Every moment felt suspended, an electric pulse promising transformation, demanding action. Then, as if the heavens aligned, the final piece clicked into place. Disheveled crates were pushed aside, revealing a side door to the loading bay. It was there, she recognized, that their secrets would surface. Her chance had come. Convey this information back home, mobilize her community with careful tactics. All she needed was to stay invisible long enough to gather the last remnants of evidence. In that moment, with her heart hammering furiously against her ribcage, Emily transformed into a vessel of action. Every instinct told her to brave the danger ahead and seize this opportunity. Driven by a profound sense of purpose, she rose from her crouch and dashed to the nearby door, a decisive act that could echo across the pathways of change, not just for her but for all those who'd felt powerless. As she burst through the exit, her breath hitched while the crisp air hit her face, invigorating her essence. A new layer of clarity washed over her. She was stepping fully into her newfound identity, finally armed with truth forged through courage. The culmination of this struggle prepared her to present the evidence to those who mattered, the community she had fought for, once silenced but now emboldened. That evening, back at Maple Grove, as patrons reunited over comforting meals, she took a deep breath, knowing she would harness her revelations. They were no longer mere stories, they were ropes binding a groundswell, a shared desire to rise against exploitation. With steadfast resolve, she began to share her findings, pulling her community together. That was the moment Emily not only transformed her world but also became a beacon of hope, an unstoppable force requesting action against an overwrought, unjust power. She had proven to herself that her voice mattered and her fight would resonate through those warm diner walls, steeling them for the forces to come. And as they discussed their plan, her confidence solidified. It resonated through the diner like the heartwarming clatter of dishes, a newfound strength coursing through their unity. Finally, she stood poised to make a difference, knowing well that her journey had indeed just begun. The stakes were real, but so too was her power, a force ignited for significant change, rising from the ashes of their shared narrative. Now was the defining moment where not just Emily became a leader, but an entire community emerged as one, unyielding and ready to confront the odds together. This was just the beginning. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories that follow Emily's journey. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep the momentum going. Comment your thoughts and theories about how Emily will overcome this corporate threat. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to be inspired by this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. Your support matters.